So joining me today on Know Your Company is Yogesh Kabra, the founder of XYXX. So before we get into what the company is all about, Yogesh, tell me about the name and tell me, by the way, how old are you? When did you start this company? Because you look like a very young entrepreneur.
No, I'm pretty old compared to the quality of founders exist in the ecosystem. I just on the 29th turned 33.
That is old.
So
That's old. Yeah.
that's pretty old. I also have a kid, which makes me older.
Yeah.
so so no, quickly onto the name, right? So while we would plan, I mean, thinking around how to build the brand and the brand architecture, one emotion we wanted to build on, I'll talk a little bit more on why that emotion was curiosity.
Oh,
And while we were brainstorming on a bunch of names, XYXX sort of stood out in terms of every person that I've met who has some sort of interest in asking a decent question would ask me why this name, which essentially was why we selected the name. Because if you look at the broad category of fashion in general, all
right.
the names are very English, right? Which is I'm not sure if I'm supposed to name, but it would be Mac, Weldon, Tommy, John,
Sure, sure,
which
sure.
give you a very English high street feeling. And we, I mean, breaking the clutter is part of our DNA, and we wanted to break that narrative. It's true for fashion in general. So we selected a name that would essentially do justice to the curiosity emotion that we were trying to build on, and I think the
That
brand does that
that
decently
clearly
well.
that clearly comes through. Although I can continue to ask you why not, ABC or whatever else.
No, absolutely, fair question. So this was one, right? And the brand obviously stood for differentiation, which is goes back to why I started this, right? I started this because I mean, I to the core, I believe consumer brands need to solve consumer problems. If you don't want to solve a consumer problem, you better start manufacturing and don't get into brand.
Okay.
And I come from a manufacturing background, so I can sort of guarantee you're better off starting manufacturing. The reason why I started this was, if you look at how India's a big consumer, big consumption sort of country, and consumer palette inherently is very different, right? Food we eat, the clothes, the shirts we wear, not just consumer cohorts are different, but consumer itself would behave very differently in different situations. For
Sure.
example, you'd wear a different shirt at a weekend getaway versus office versus after party, right? Three different brands, three different cultures. In innerwear, which is essentially the first garment you wear every day and sort of last to take off, which also signifies that it's a choice that you make every morning. It was monolithic. There was, one large incumbent that was setting the rule, and everyone. And I just thought it's nonsensical, because consumer would want different choices. And that's the opportunity. So the differentiation opportunity of breaking the black, navy, and gray, married to curiosity. We said chromosomes really differentiate one another,
Got it.
and that's how curiosity met differentiation. And yeah, I was 27, 20, 28 back then, and I thought it was pretty cool.
So, was it a natural digression for you from manufacturing
No,
no, it wasn't, and that to an
no.
innerwear, particularly, right?
Yeah, but
Innerwear,
I
casual loungewear. The problem. Sure, you might say that the market is largely untapped, but by the same token, we could argue that maybe it's because it's a market that just hasn't picked up. How would you define the problem?
I don't think that's a very investor view of doing things, right? Which is scope the market, is it large, competitive intensity, etc. We also do it, but it doesn't start with that. I mean, it starts with the consumer sort of choice, right? Which is why in a general trade aisle where most of the country buys innerwear, the options are limited to black, navy. I mean, there are four large problems, right? Lack of innovation in the category. The choices available are very sort of monolithic. The purchase experience is broken. No one's adopting to e-commerce as relevantly, because and also I'm going to talk a little bit more on D2C, which is a burning question for probably the audience that's listening. And fourth was the brand narrative. Matlab, we're selling the same brand that my dad used to wear, with essentially the same sort of core narrative. I thought things had to be different. So four problems we were solving, and after that, I did what you were saying. That hey, is the reward to solve these problems large enough for me to dedicate most of my working life to it? That's always the tough one. I mean, that's always the tough one, which is why entrepreneurs are rewarded to take risky bets.
Okay, so give me a sense of scale. You've already raised funding by some very credible investors. That must have been a journey. What are the aspirations? How have you already kind of managed to infiltrate the market? You mentioned D2C, so I'm guessing a fair amount must be expected to come in online as well.
Yep. By the way, just for the benefit of, I mean, most entrepreneurs in the country, right? I come from a non-pedigree, non-venture capital sort of tier two city. I had no clue. I mean, I had some sense on venture capital, but I didn't really know what it means. I always worked the old way of having solid unit economics. You're running a business to make money. So coming from that sort of very strong ingrained values around business fundamentals, I mean, I was solving the problem. A lot of people sort of figured were buying our product online, and then everyone's reading, all the investors were reading through the same BCG Bain report, right, which says that hey, Innerwear is going to grow. So that's how investors started approaching me, and 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 I raised the first round from. I mean, that's probably the pivotal moment of my journey of getting venture capital into the business. I think it was incredibly wise. I didn't need the money at that point, but I did need the mentoring.
Okay, that's interesting. So, Yogesh, tell us a little bit about yourself as well. You're looking at, you're sitting out of Surat, I think, yes, and
So
you're,
we moved. We have three offices now.
okay,
So Tirupur, Surat, and Bombay.
nice.
Obviously, I mean, most founders at scale would face the challenge of building a solid team, and therefore we have to sort of delve around where the talent pool is. I work out of Bombay now. Larger office still is Surat, but the management team sort of works out of Bombay. We're 300 plus now, so it's not. It's. Yeah, I mean, that's the high of entrepreneurship. The amount of impact one could have by starting a successful business is incredibly satisfying.
Oh, that's fantastic. Tell me, you are, I mean, very into sort of conscious materials. You are very aware of the current trends, or in terms of sustainability and so forth.
Yes.
How are you incorporating some of these future impact,
Yeah.
methods into your business? Because it's a young business, and this is what's going to matter 5 years, 10 years down the line.
Yes, I hope it does. Right. That's the belief that it should, and we'd sort of participate in that journey. But also, let me sort of take a step back and be brutally honest. Right. Sustainability also has been, due to how amazing we are at marketing, So sort of greenwashed. I mean, it's a journey. It's a long journey, because
Right.
to make plastic we took a really long time, and then to include plastic in our everyday life, it's a I mean, it's multi-decade journey. The reverse would also take time. So what we're looking at is, therefore, instead of saying that we're going to solve this completely, we're saying we're going to take steps to solve it in a fairly sort of reasonable amount of time. So the first few steps are obviously packaging, what goes into the product, how do I operate my office premise, etc. Right? We use corn base alternate to plastic, which is biodegradable as part of the packaging. We also used a lot of recycled paper, which the consumer do not unfortunately fully appreciate, because they think the paper quality is bad. Where I mean, anything recycled, anything organic, right? Uh, would never be as good as something that's synthetically done. Uh, that's the reason why we synthetically did it, right? Because organic was not good enough. So we face a lot of challenges in terms of how this evolution will take place, how much consumer will adapt to it, and obviously for a young company, educating the consumer about it is extremely expensive. We are head down doing our bit, without sort of claiming tall sort of claims. We do packaging very sustainably. We all the raw material that we source are blends or purely out of a very sort of recycled and sustainable process. And it's a journey, right? I could argue that nothing is sustainable versus this is plus 10%, plus 15%. In everything that we do, we look for that 10-15% plus, and not solve it completely, but have a more sustainable approach towards solving. I think more than talking, it's doing.
So tell me, why today would somebody buy an XYXX product versus a jockey or something? How much of a dent have you made in the market? That's habitual, right? They're used to the old. How do you convince them to change? Is it a pricing game? Is it a style game? What is it? Because most people go with the comfort of it.
Yes, and it's just a better product. I mean, the pitch is very simple. I'll also tell you why it's a better product, right? So traditionally, right, the innovation that we bought into the mainstream men's innerwear market was the fabric. The fabric is based sort of, the source of the fabric is beechwood trees. So it's not sort of coming out of crude and byproduct. It's not grown like cotton. It's a cellulosic fiber. I don't know. So 10 years back, when I was in the textile industry, this fiber was taking sort of coming into the Indian ecosystem. It's existed, but it was very expensive. So I don't know if you remember, but the Japanese baby sanitary, I mean, baby diapers, the really high quality European sanitary pads would have cellulosic fiber. Why? Three things. It absorbs moisture much better. It's cooler to touch, and it's naturally antibacterial. Apart from that, it's extremely soft. So it's 3 times softer than cotton. So makes sense, right? I mean, if all of these qualities are there, baby diapers and sanitary pads were the first use case. And then I thought, why not men's innerwear? Innerwear is sort of this comfort code is very similar to this diaper and sanitary pads categories, and very happy to sort of tell you that we were the first sort of player in the men's innerwear segment to do this. Obviously, it was very tough because I didn't know how people would react, because it's extremely soft, and
Okay.
I didn't know that how the reaction would be, but it's been overwhelmingly sort of in the premium space. Just to give you a sense of scale, we now are probably the third largest brand in the core categories of briefs, trunks, vest. Uh, which answers your first question, right? Why would
Yeah, I was
anyone?
going to say. All right. No, this is great. It gives us a sense on how quickly you're growing, in this segment. How big a market potentially do you feel the menswear segment really is?
Men's innerwear is about. I mean, there are multiple research reports. I'm just quoting one of
Yeah.
them. Is about two odd $1 billion. I mean, growing aggressively. The premium segment is supposed to grow at a 15% compounding for the next 5 years. And think about it, right? Large market and no variety, right? It's a no-brainer if you think about it like that. Handful of brands, and everyone's trying to copy the large brand. So
So yeah. So
no
Yogesh,
original
you
thinking.
got So you came back, you dived into a completely new segment. I mean, you came back from the US, you dived into a completely new segment. Like you said, you didn't have, any kind of like privilege. You kind of had to start ground up. What would be perhaps some tips for, let's say, 3 tips for other entrepreneurs who are perhaps starting ground up, integrating work culture, integrating integrating work culture, getting into new cities, a new segment,
Yeah, yeah.
really sort of trying to spread the word or awareness about the product, all of these things.
Yeah, no, so I think, historically, not just with us right now, right? Uh, all the big brands that we talk about today, whether it's Coca-Cola or Marks and Spencer's, they were all built on a great product. So, and then brands over time sort of have become really strong, but
Sure.
at the core, they were exceptionally good products, and some created categories, some were breaking clutter in a category. So I think what you have to really be honest about is the product good enough? I mean, is there a right to win in the category? And I've got this wrong a couple of times, right? Because we just don't do one product. I've thought that the adjacent category that we're doing, we have a right to win in the product, but the market sort of thought otherwise. So has to be validated. You have to be sort of the consumer love for the core offering has to be extremely visible. If that's not, I'd sort of go back again to the drawing board. See, so just to give you an anecdotal example, my first customer, Jayesh Bhai Parmar from Pune, bought a black, gray, and a lime green sort of innerwear. Called me, bought for 2 boys. He had 2 kids. He was 50 at that point, and then sort of was sending the product in his friends WhatsApp groups, and used to check with me that this guy ordered. And this is a low engagement category. People don't talk
Yeah.
about this, right? People don't
Yeah.
recommend. Men don't recommend
Yeah. Of
underwear,
course.
right? So that's the validation I got of the product initially, and that consumer love is critical to scale a business. I think apart from that, I mean, strong fundamentals in terms of gross margins, etc. Enough and more companies have said that, hey, अभी नहीं है margin, बाद में आ जाएगा, but बाद में आता नहीं है. So I mean, you have to start with strong unit economics. And a third underplayed is the brand. I mean, eventually, there has to be a narrative difference in how you talk to consumer, because even though sale might not happen, I mean, even D2C or digital might not have exceptional revenue potential, but consumer spending time online, which is why we're doing this.
Well, this has been great chatting because I can see that you're very uh, you're very passionate about what you're doing, and there are multiple streams to it. Like you said, building the narrative, ensuring that it's a product that consumers love and it's solving a problem for them. And you're clearly on an upward trajectory. So Yogesh, I hope we get to chat again very soon.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.